Australian support for South Vietnam in the early 1960s was in keeping with the policies of other nations to stem the spread of communism in Europe and Asia. South Vietnam requested security assistance from the US and its allies, and Australia responded initially with 30 advisors, the Australian Army Training Team Vietnam, in August 1962. By early 1965, as communist insurgents tightened their grip on South Vietnam, the US commenced a major escalation of the war. In June, Australia further dispatched 1st Battalion, the Royal Australian Regiment, with support from Royal Australian Air Force and Royal Australian Navy. Wanting to make a stronger commitment to the war, the Australian government announced in 1966 the dispatch of a task force consisting of a further 2 battalions and support services, including conscripts who had been called up under the National Service Scheme. In August 1966, Australians were engaged in one of their heaviest actions of the war, in a rubber plantation near Long Tan. The 108 soldiers of D Company 6 RAR held off an enemy force estimated at over 2,000 for 4 hours in the middle of a tropical downpour. They were greatly assisted by ammunition resupply from RAAF helicopters, close fire support from their artillery, and the timely arrival of reinforcements. Despite this, 17 Australians were killed and 25 wounded, one of whom later died. (1968) began with a major offensive by the Viet Cong and North Vietnamese Army, launched during the Vietnamese Lunar New Year holiday period, known as Tet. While the Tet offensive ultimately ended in military defeat for the Communists, it was a propaganda victory as public opinion in the US turned increasingly against the war. Later in 1968, Australians fought grimly at the battles of Coral and Balmoral, once more against heavy odds. By the end of April 1970, fighting had spilled over into neighbouring Cambodia. This extension of the war provided the impetus for many anti-war demonstrations back home. Protests and mass demonstration marches ensued across Australia. Australia began to wind down its military effort in Vietnam in late 1970, and our participation was formally declared at an end on the 11th of January 1973. Then, in early 1975, the Communists launched a major offensive in South Vietnam, resulting in the fall of Saigon on the 30th of April. In the final days, a Royal Australian Air Force detachment flew humanitarian missions to aid civilian refugees and evacuated Vietnamese orphans before removing embassy staff as well. The war was finally over. Many returned to a country racked with political dissent and social upheaval, where those who served faced hostility and rejection. In October 1987, a national Welcome Home March was held. But for many, the physical and mental scars of war remained for many years.